Okay, well, I'm not a speaker, I'm a writer or trying to be a writer. My name is Mary Silberstein and I'm the Vice President of SLO NightWriters, and welcome to our July meeting, everybody, and everybody on Zoom. Yeah, good turnout. Do we have any new members tonight? We have one right here. And could you tell me your name? Peggy Rothschild. And what kind of writing are you interested in?
I just, my first cozy mystery was published by Berkeley this past February. And I joined online like a month ago, but this is my first meeting I'm actually attending.
Great, well, welcome. Welcome.
Relatively new to the area.
Oh, all right, well, great. I hope you come every meeting. That's great. I think we had another gentleman in there, but he's not in here yet.
He's right here.
Oh,
He's right here.
oh, hi, yes. What is your name?
Dick Bray.
Dick Bray.
Uh-huh.
And what are you writing or interested in writing?
Poetry.
Poetry, that's right. Oh, yeah, and Janice will be happy about that. I write poetry too. I'm just not in any poetry groups. That's awesome.
Little short ones lots of times.
Yeah, oh, great. And where do you live?
Pardon?
Where do you live?
About 3 minutes from here.
Oh, in Slow. Oh, great.
Pretty good.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
All right.
And, so I'm kind of excited to see what everybody has to say and get some ideas.
Yeah, great. Well, welcome. Well, maybe we'll have a poetry group sometime on one of our meetings. A meeting on that. That would be great. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Well, I thought I had an interesting thing happen last week, and I wanted to talk about that because I wanted to ask you a question. How is your writing going this summer? Are you productive or are you lazy and blocked? And as for me, I've been lazy and not very inspired. I started thinking about this when I had to move my writing desk last week in order to get a window replaced. I'd written little encouraging notes all along my windowsill that were taped there next to my desk, and I had to remove them to get this window put in. It hadn't been working lately. But here are some of the memes I wanted to share that I had written next to my desk. And I don't know, as writers, if your little writing space, if you do this, but one of them was create, practice, polish, and persist. Another one was character drives plot. And this one I always loved when I got down and out about my little fiction story I was writing. A story should create a vivid and continuous dream. And then this one's a tough one. Your story problem or goal should be punishing, relatable, original, believable, life-altering, entertaining, and meaningful. That's a lot. That's a lot. I like the punishing part. I was going to tell you, if you like any of these memes, let me know and I'll email them to you after the meeting. Yeah, because they're really fun. What's that?
Who gets punished, the writer?
The person trying to read the goal, I think. I copied it from somebody. I'm sorry, I'm not telling you who wrote them, but anyway, if you find these helpful, I can email them to you. And does anybody have any off the top of their head that they use, that they can think of? Probably you have them at home, right next to your desk. But
Edit.
Judy says, edit, 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 edit. Isn't that the sickening truth? Okay. What I personally realize with my writing is that sometimes we need to take it easy on ourselves and just do something, anything that encourages us on a writer's path, whether it's attending this Night Writers meeting, reading a good book or article about writing, going to a poetry reading, or creating special space and time for our writing, which that's really important. Little efforts can pay off and encourage us. I challenge you tonight to ask yourself the question, what am I doing that supports my writing? On that note, do we have any kudos tonight? Anybody have anything published or finished a project? Or Judy, you have a project?
I am working on a 3
reading a series of sort of my life, but also of the stuff I've written over the years. So I chose Ohio and Fresno and then the coast. So I just published the first one for Ohio.
Oh, awesome.
The theme is connection. And it seems like on my writing, everything goes to connection. It's just in everything I write and everything I do and everything I think about. So I put a challenge to anybody who reads it to find connection in some of it, because there's fiction in there, poetry, essays, memoir, whatever, snippets, things that just popped into my head while I was writing that.
Did everybody on Zoom get that? Is it kind of hard to hear? You didn't get it? You want to come up and say that? Come on. We don't have a, problem is we don't have a microphone.
We're happy looking here.
Oh, yeah.
It's this Zoom thing we have to do.
I
So
know.
Judy's going to tell you what she's been doing.
So hi to everybody on Zoom.
You have to look
Because
at
that's where I usually am. My book is eclectic. It's not, I was born here, although I do start out with where I was born. I was born on the cusp of the, sorry to say pandemic, on the cusp of World War II and the end of the Great Depression. So I do mention that at the beginning, but I just go all over the place because I didn't want to go from here to there as a memoir. And it really wasn't just a memoir. It was a collection of things that I've written, some of them published, some of them not published. So it was a fun project. It really was. And it brought up a lot of memories for me. So I hope people will enjoy it, but I also hope they'll get inspired to connect these little connections. You know what they say, don't sweat the small stuff, sweat the small stuff. Really, thank you.
Okay, before we move on and introduce the speakers, I just have two more announcements. The winners of the Golden Announcement, not announcement, the winners of the Golden Quill contest have not yet been determined, but they will be very shortly. So you will hear about that soon, probably before the next meeting, from what I understand. And I do want to add something else. It's kind of a sticky wicket, I guess you could say. Our organization is in great need of additional board members. So I really would encourage anybody out there that has some extra time to get involved with SLO NightWriters in some capacity. The three positions that we have open are a critique coordinator, a membership chair, and a newsletter editor. We don't have a newsletter going out right now on our website, and we really want to start that up again. And that's a great opportunity for someone, especially to put on your resume. You know, I was the newsletter editor for SLO NightWriters, you know, if you want to build that up.
Do it.
Yeah, if you're writing, let's write it. So anyway, I just want to encourage you to step up to the plate for some of these positions. And there's training. It's not like it's a big deal, you know. I mean, well, it is a big deal. You commit some time, but we have monthly board meetings, and Leonard knows he's on the board. Jim's on the board. But think about it and consider it. Or if you know somebody else who has great talents in marketing or something else, encourage them to contact us. So without further ado, please welcome our wonderful speakers tonight. We have Dennis Young, who is the president of Sisters in Crime. And then we have I'm sorry, Dennis, you're not published yet, is that right?
I've been published with short stories.
Short stories, okay, I haven't.
Yeah.
Okay,
I've got a book that's ready to go out and be
right,
edited and finished.
right,
Yeah.
right, great, that's good. I've been waiting for that book. So have you, right?
Yeah,
And then we also have Tony Piazza, a mystery and crime novelist, who brought his books here tonight. Got 5 books? Yeah.
actually 6.
6. Wow, that's fantastic. You can see the books here he's brought. And then we have Rolynn Andersen, a travel and crime mystery novelist, and her books are back there. I love the covers, they're so beautiful. All right, so welcome. What they're going to talk to us tonight about is how to develop crime, law, and justice novels and the differences with other genres. And also address will be the keys to success as a crime writer. So let's give them a warm welcome.
Hey.
I see.
Everybody on Zoom.
Okay, I get it, how this works. How loud do we need to speak?
Normal, it's a good microphone.
Okay, very good.
So we are gathered here to basically distribute pearls of wisdom. As soon as we find some, we'll let you know.
Yeah. I thought you were gonna say, we're here to kill people.
Not yet.
Okay.
We have to warm them up a little bit
Okay.
first. Yeah, Roland's very good at that. Okay, I think the first thing on everybody's mind might be how to write mystery and make a fortune, right? So, what do you think, Roland?
How to write mystery and write and make a fortune. The good news is this particular genre, that is crime, thriller, suspense, is selling well right now. But you've got to be a well-known writer with some cred and a big publishing company. So I have not made a fortune yet. Tony, have you made a fortune?
No, I wouldn't say that I made a fortune. Now, it is very difficult because there's a lot of competition out there to begin with. And then again, you're up against some of the big publishing companies, which makes it very difficult because there's a lot of money that's involved in order to doing the ads and getting the word out there. And so we're basically on our own when it comes to that aspect of it. But at least for me, the important thing is I want to create something that's very entertaining and that people enjoy. And I just like the idea of being read. So I don't have to make a fortune. I just like to have people respond to me as they do sometimes either through Facebook or through some of the other areas or just in person and let me know that they enjoyed my book. And that's really means a lot to me.
And Tony does a really good job of reaching out in the community and finding resources, finding ways to get readers through bookstores and things. The trick for anybody trying to make a fortune, and I agree with Tony, you have to learn how to market. But the most important thing is to figure out who your readers are, respect them, and write for them. Now that's, I don't mean to say you're not writing for yourself, because you please yourself as a writer, but you also have to know who you're tagging, who's going to read your books and how to reach them. So then you can make a fortune.
Okay, so now you know the secrets to making a fortune. Okay, you know, something very interesting as we were getting prepared and we were standing here, we were talking about the fact that writing mysteries, crime novels, whatever, actually is not just this one stratified piece of work. There's so many different directions that people can go in, and you can have everything from cozy novels. Am I right? Yes.
Peggy?
Right. And you can have somebody like, for instance, I write, my mentor in mystery writing is Mickey Spillane. I like a hero who just comes in and knocks everybody down, turns around, and then his girlfriend knocks him down. But that's sort of what I get a kick out of. But Tony is more of a gentleman's approach. If you remember the Thin Man series, that's what I equate your writing to, the Thin Man series. Protagonist, more elegant. I can't manage the elegant part. So that's why I read your books, to get the elegant part.
Yeah.
And Rolynn has this very unique corner that she's working on so well, because she wants to make people travel and have fun, have a good time, and have a mystery in there. You know, and it's almost like an Agatha Christie approach with the travel.
Right.
you've taken it over into a different corner that's all your own.
Right, and some of you who heard my talk about romance know that I always have some romantic relationship in my novels. Some people call that romantic suspense. And then you're gonna laugh about this, but some writers will start telling you what percentage of romance they have in their novels and what percent is action plot, you know, that kind of thing. I guess I'm pretty much in the 40% category of romance now. And yet I have to have it in there. I believe that I get double the mystery, double the trouble, double the intrigue, because relationships are just as unusual and compelling as the mystery plot. Who killed who, you know, who murdered who. That's my genre. Yeah, that's interesting. Do you call yours noir? Is noir wrong?
It's sort of borderline. I mean, it's sort of an amalgam of the American detective novel, the classic American
Yes.
detective novel like Raven Chandler, and then also the English mystery novel, because there is some Agatha Christie because of the puzzle that's in it.
That's right.
So I include all of that. And I lean towards the nostalgia more than anything
Yes,
else.
you do.
Because when I was growing up, I loved, you know, the books of the 60s that came out, the old detective novels that were famous back then. Mickey Spillane gets to be one of them. And there were many more as well, too.
Sure.
John D. McDonald, I think, was another
Yes,
one.
loved
Remember
him.
those? Yeah. And so I just wanted to sort of reproduce that, because I was having trouble finding that when I would go into a bookstore these days.
Right.
And so I sort of leaned on the fact that I wanted to get into the nostalgia. There's a little romance, but there's no steaming pot, as one of the reviewers put up on their reviews. But I do, and you brought up The Thin Man, which is interesting. There is a little bit of that, which wasn't planned, but it just worked out that way. And then, of course, I tried to interject the humor. I also interject, you know, I spend a lot of time traveling. So wherever I'm writing about, I like to be there and to experience and go to the restaurants and taste the foods and stuff. And so we do a lot of that. So I interject that into the book as well, too. And of course, the biggest trickiest part is, of course, I set my book in the 1930s in Hollywood and various other places, but it was the main base of his detective agencies in Hollywood. And so from the experience that I had when I used to work with the film and television industry back in the 70s, I'm able to interject a lot of that in there as well, too, plus Hollywood history, which fascinates me. So it's sort of a combination of all the things that makes up the genre that I'm involved in.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And you were talking about how you differentiate the kinds of books we write. Actually, this is a very limited mystery crime that we're talking about. We're missing a person who's talking about cozies. Now, in cozies, they often take place in a small town. You know a lot of characters. They're often series. They're often dogs or cats. They're not very bloody. And I've got blood in mine. You can actually take blood and figure out the permutations of different mystery crime thrillers. You can figure out, you know, and your reader will say, how much blood does it have in it? And I'll say, I'm medium. And then the other reader will say, oh, how much science, how much forensics? And I'll say, not so much. I got sleuths. They're amateurs, you know. So it's you could probably say that our books have less humor, but I like humor in my books. I think that I write about normal people who are funny sometimes. So all of you write about, have humor in your books. I think there's less angst in our books than literary fiction. You know, it's not about the psychological and the angst. You know what I'm talking about. I think there's less narrative in our books and more action. No?
I try to balance it out a little.
Yeah, I do. I do.
Yeah.
I'd say that I'm just like Tony. I like the world stage. The other thing that I guess we would talk about to differentiate is, so the cozy is in a small town and it affects these few people. Sometimes you can differentiate these crime, mystery, thrillers by who is affected by the action that's going on in the text. So if it's like a Holocaust, if it's going to be a bomb's going to go off and kill a whole town, that's a thriller. I don't write thrillers. Mine are concentrated in a smaller group of people, and the whole world doesn't care what happened in my little place. But you can't differentiate by that. You'll find your reader. One reader loves thrillers. They want to see the whole world not implode today. Thank you very much. But there are others who want to go to a little town and learn everybody there and pet the dog.
Well, something that we're talking about here, which is very important, is basically research. Okay, because you're set in the 1930s, you're set in a more modern day and age, but
Yes.
still with your travel adventures, there's a lot of research that goes into that.
That time.
Now, when I approached my character Corbin Cochran, I set it in late 40s in New York, because I'm from Brooklyn, New York. I grew up there. I know it like the back of my hand. I started writing. Suddenly it came to me that I have no idea what New York in the 1940s was like, because New York's always changing. So suddenly I'm immersed in all of this research, and my character, unlike the cozy novels, my character goes from New York to China and back again, and a lot of blood, people getting thrown off cliffs, things like that. You know, I sort of like that very rambunctious style. I call it rambunctious. You might want to call it bloody or other stuff. But Mary, for instance, was in a group that we had for a long time with Susan Tuttle, and we would do exercises. And I found that you can, and you're talking, you mentioned humor.
Yes.
You can research all you want about everything else, but somehow there has to be humor, a gentle humor, but humanity in the characters. You know, we can have all these tough guys running around doing everything like in the movies. They fly off buildings and all. But you still have to touch the reader. You have to, the reader has to want that character to get through the next episode because they care about it. And part of that is the research of the characters and the research into the area that you're going to explore the adventure in. You want to pick up on that?
Sure. I think that, and this again gets at everything that you write, because half of you don't care about this particular type of writing. And so I'm trying to reach your place. I think where I started loving these kinds of novels is Edgar Allan Poe. I mean, and then I read the Gothics, and those are full of mystery.
Mhm.
And I read widely in the mystery thriller area. So I'm a little bit more eclectic, but I was an English teacher too. So there you go. That does make a difference. But I think as I was thinking about what we were going to talk about, I was going to say tonight, I think in the end, all of us are writing about the fact that humans prefer order, not chaos. They prefer stability, not confusion and betrayal. But our job is to talk about confusion and betrayal and chaos. And in my case, I have people like you and me who are smart enough, and this is where my voice comes in, who have this nascent ability to help, to learn how to love, to learn how to use a community to help solve major crime. That's kind of what we're busy with, making order out of chaos and stability out of confusion and betrayal. And I see that in every piece of literature I read. Shakespeare, how about the Greek plays? They're all about that. Your thoughts?
No, well, I was thinking more in terms of the way I address my stories, in terms of the fact that I feel that reality, I mean, we're faced with it every day. We see it on the news, we're dealing with different things. And so my idea is to escape, to get the person to escape. So when I end my stories usually end on a high note. I don't, and that's my aim, is because I want the people to leave with a smile and, not with tears.
Me too.
Yeah. And so that's one of the things that I look at as well, too.
But you want people to care about. You're absolutely right.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think your character needs to be vulnerable. I think that's important.
Yep.
And I mean, and I find that it's either that or you have a cardboard character, which is really
Right.
death right there. You need something that has a lot of character in it.
And I'd add on to that reality fact. It seems like, I mean, I've had an interesting life. I'm a traveler. I was a high school principal, hell, 20 years younger than I look. I opened a brand new high school. And that was, I can do anything since I did that. But I like to think that my characters might have lived normal lives, except this thing happened. This crisis occurred and it put them into overdrive. It's transformational. So I like to transform them from kind of normal folk, then have something hit them like a dead person. Well, maybe not hit them, but they see one. And then all of a sudden they begin to figure out how to solve it and they become better than who they were. That's what I like to do.
I think too, it's important to have a backstory, even if it's not necessarily, I mean, I create a backstory, but I not necessarily have it in all the books, but I know, the story behind my character. And I think that gives it a certain amount of reality. And then you can get by with some of the other impossible things that might happen along the way when you do that.
That's right.
Yeah.
Like your subplots.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. Exactly.
And I don't know about all your writing. I know in your cozy, Peggy, you do it. But most of us who write crime, mystery, thrillers, we are known for our subplots. So we have the main plot that about every 40 pages, we tie in a subplot. So subplot 1, okay, you're starting out here in the middle of everything, of course, where it's exciting. Subplot 1, and then, move on your general plot. Subplot 2 kicks in 20 pages later, then you just ladder it or tapestry it. So we are into subplots. I don't like my reader. I like to surprise my reader by the end of the novel with something they never saw. I mean, when they look back, they realize there were clues, but I like to surprise the hell out of them. Yet, I'm a romantic suspense writer. I've learned that surprising a reader doesn't last as long as suspending the reader. So I spend time in my books trying to elongate the suspense instead of just a quick surprise. That's tricky. I'm still learning. It's really a task for a good romantic suspense writer.
One of the things I sort of studied is film. And I think film's a great medium in order to develop your storylines. And of course, in my case, I go back to the old films of the 30s and the 40s, and of course, Alfred Hitchcock. And when you talk about suspense, I mean, suspense, he was a master of it. And so he would perhaps show a bomb underneath the table and everybody would know that it's there, the audience would, but maybe not the people in the room. And they keep sort of going back and forth on that. And you can do that in writing as well, too. You can present it to the readers and design it in such a way that you can build up that suspense. So I was actually I got to see him work on his last film. When he did Family Plot, I was able to sit in and watch him work on that. And again,
What an opportunity.
It was he's quite a legend.
That's great. What else, boss?
Okay. The thing everybody loves, POV.
Oh, okay.
Because you want to take and you want to be in the head of your character, but you don't want to live through them. You want to touch bases with them and get your voice inside them. But you have to do it in a way that the reader connects with them as a person without thinking that everything that's coming from them has to be from you.
Want to start that?
Well, I approach, actually, all the books are first person. So you can do a lot about what's going on up here.
I like first person.
I did do third person in The Curse of the Crimson Dragon because actually that is more of a thriller than a mystery. Because it was sort of based upon almost like the chapter plays that they used to have in the films back in, our early days. Would you come back to the theater to find out how that certain character escaped what he did? But one of the difficulties that I found has to do with the fact that when you are writing first person, that you can't mind read what some of your other characters are doing. Because once you do that, then it just spoils the whole book. So you're constantly sort of limited to that. You can't have, for example, somebody is sneaking around the corner, which somebody, your main protagonist doesn't see. But yet he says, oh, well, then suddenly in the background, there's something, well, wait a minute, how could he see it? He's over here and this is happening back here. Okay, we got a problem.
Mhm.
So you always have to work around it, where in the third person you don't. But yeah, with Pio, it's interesting because then you become an actor. That's the way I look at it, because if you have different characters, you don't want your same personality, if your personality gets into it, and all the characters that you're doing. So suddenly, if you're the villain and maybe this villain has certain problems, psychological, whatever, now you got to start to think on his level and deal with that. And again, I'm talking third person in that regard. But in the first person situation, it's basically coming from you and maybe reading off other people that's in the story. So it's a for me, it's a little less of a challenge than doing the third person for that reason.
Years ago, when I was in New York, I hooked up with this Puerto Rican filmmaker. And he said, well, you want to make movies? Sure. But what we did was he became the main character in the movies. He was the hero. I got to be the bad guy. God, is that fun? But it teaches you a different way of thinking, because suddenly you're not in the mode of being a nice guy and doing, helping the lady across the street. No, you're a rotten, evil character. But somehow you still have to have humanity in that bad character. There has to be something on an intuitive level that you can hook into and say, okay, here's somebody who's really pretty evil, but there has to be something that makes them a human being at some point in their life. More thoughts on that?
The only thing that comes to my mind there is that's why a lot of times you'll notice in the villains that they'll have some sort of a physical anomaly or something about them that sort of reads back and says, well, maybe they're that way because maybe there's a kid who's made fun of or something because of that. I mean, they work from that perspective. But I do agree with you in writing The Curse of the Crimson Dragon, it was fun to work with the villains and to create those characters. And again, I think in some regards, I went maybe a little bit overboard because of the fact that I was writing like a chapter play to begin with. And then, of course, what other things come to mind? You think of Ian Fleming and the Bond characters, and you had Blofeld, you had all of these, and they all had these weird things about them. And he didn't necessarily always go in psychologically, but you could just tell by the way they reacted to things, by the way they looked and stuff, that they were true villains for that reason.
Yeah.
So.
Viewpoint for me is I write in third person, and I haven't tried it yet, but I'd like to try. I was thinking about writing in first person and then being an unreliable narrator. Wouldn't that be fun? Because I think that we always expect our I people to be pretty cool people, except if they're identified as a villain. I have done a villain once, and it was okay, but I like, our books go bad. The worlds in our books go bad because of villains. And because it's a surprise to the people to whom all this is happening, I like to keep that a secret who the villain is. That's my preference. So that they and the reader are trying to find the villain at the same time. Villains don't usually announce themselves. Well, except if they're political entities. But, you know, normally they're working undercover. They don't want anybody to notice them, right? And so I'm thinking, okay, my characters don't know. And, you know, little by little, you get to find the secrets that get you to the villain. But I tried writing in first person. And I changed it to third. I wrote the whole thing in first and changed it to third because I wanted to be more omniscient. I wanted to see into everybody. And I'm limited omniscient. I'm not godlike. I try not to, I'm not judging from the top. I am just trying to see everything that I can possibly see with my camera and do the best job I can at describing it.
Well, actually, too, it's like there's two different approaches because when you're writing a mystery per se, then a lot of times you want to keep the killer a secret. That's the
Yeah.
whole point of the whole book.
Of course.
And that's
It's a
basically what you're doing.
whodunit.
It's a whodunit, exactly. That's what you're leaning for. And of course, the puzzle again is the important thing because you want to take the readers through each stage of it with your little clues and things along the way so to see if they can try to solve it. In an adventure like that particular one, it's a little different. It's more linear and you can create those villains right up front and have a hero that has to deal with it. So there's a little different approach there. But in the mystery genre, you're absolutely correct. You want to keep it a secret until you get to that point where,
Right.
you know, and I try to keep it as much as toward the last page as I can.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and you know, there's where the real challenge is, because if you've ever seen any of these detective films, and I'll use The Thin Man as an example, the last chapter, or you could call it the last portion of the story, is the detective going through this long explanation. Oh, Agatha Christie, Poirot, going through this long explanation of how it is that he finally made the deduction that he
Right.
made. And that is really a challenge. And there's where a lot of my outlining and stuff goes, because I like to get it, you know, perfect. Otherwise, you'll hear about it. That's
I
the
know. Yeah. This novel I'm working on right now. Oh, brother, I've got myself already a big challenge. With each book, I try something new. I mean, I try to tad a paranormal in one. I tried to show two different periods of time. I had a cold case that happened in 1930 in Petersburg, Alaska, and I tied in a recent murder with that to show how those two murders were solved. And that was complicated. But the what I'm working on right now is a woman who's a captain of a yacht. She's for hire, and she's taking 8 guests who've won a trip to the Alaska glaciers. And it's an Agatha Christie. And I swear to you, I'm going to have to outline the damn thing.
Yeah,
And I don't like outlining.
I know.
English teacher, I hate outlining, but I can see already that I am in deep trouble. And so every novel presents a new challenge, and this one is driving me crazy, but I'm going to write it. I'm going to write it because I've been up there in my boat to Alaska's glaciers, and I know exactly where I'm going to put this boat when it gets into trouble. And I have the people all set on that boat, damn it. I just have to figure out what's going to happen. Very fun.
Very good. What about continuing plot lines? When you have a story that's encapsulated in one book, but there's a thread, and how big a thread would you use in order to carry it on, so you go into the second
And a
or
second
third
book,
or a third book
Mhm.
even? you
Well-
know, because you can't have too much of a line, otherwise people will feel at the end of the first book that they've just been gobsmacked.
Right.
mine are all, I've got 2 series. One is called Women at the Helm. And these are, there's a prawer. She is an MIT grad who inherits a prawn boat, prawn shrimp. Another one is a woman who's running a marina as a widow with her son in the isolated reaches of British Columbia. And then I just told you about the one I'm writing right now, about the trip to the glaciers in the yacht. I don't try to have you remember. They could stand alone, but they have a few characters that are intertwined that my readers will remember. And they will remember the setting. They will remember the ocean, the challenge of nature, and all of that. I wrote another series called the Funeral Planner Suspense Series. This is a boutique funeral planner whose dead clients refuse to rest in peace, damn it. And she starts planning funerals, and they end up being these people whose families or they themselves are criminals. And she's got to uncover all this. Anyway, I did have some of those characters carry through, but you didn't have to remember very much about what happened in the other one. So it's kind of like a cozy, but it's got more blood and more sex than a cozy.
Rolling.
It does have a dog though. My God, I put a dog in there. I will never put a dog in a book again because you have to know where that dog is all the time. And you have to feed the damn thing and take it out, or the reader's gonna say, where's the dog? I'm never writing about a dog.
No, but sometimes that works. Tony, you've made that work in the mystery you did
Yeah,
in Coronado.
I love your little dog in there.
Yeah, and
it's actually was modeled after our little dog that we
I know
had.
it was the
Yeah, the little
dog.
cocker spaniel. Yeah, it was. You know, it's sort of interesting because, yeah, my books in the series progress, but they can stand alone as well too.
Mhm.
And the thing is, I don't want to repeat myself. That's one thing that I think is dangerous right there.
right.
So each one is sort of, I've got it to the point where the themes and the settings change. I mean, the first book was basically all Hollywood and all the, would you say, the monuments and stuff, things that you relate to Hollywood. Then when we got into the second one, I was fascinated with the Thelma Todd murder, which was an actual a case that had occurred in 1933 with the death of actress Thelma Todd. So I had devised the story around that, and part of it was the fact of driving along along the highway there, the Pacific Coast Highway, and I saw the old cafe that was there, and that inspired me. I said, "Wow, this is a great place," and there's murders up in the hills and everything. So I developed that in Murder Amongst Angels. But during that time, Thelma Todd, in her photographs, had a Cocker Spaniel that looked similar to the Cocker Spaniel we had. So when the end came and something had to happen with that Cocker Spaniel, well, where does it end up? It ends up with the detective. And that's how that got started. And so then they got the dog, and of course, the development of the wife that he ends up marrying started off with a girlfriend, a secretary, and eventually becoming a wife. So now you have the wife, the detective, and the dog. And then we got into, you know, the Thin Man sort of area. And I did a lot with the Del Coronado and their honeymoon and how a murder occurred on the honeymoon. They didn't get to have a good honeymoon, so where do they end up? At the Grand Canyon in the next book? A murder occurs there.
No sex yet.
Yeah, and then and then from there, they end up, of course, now I lost my thought. You threw me off.
I'm sorry.
But from there, the Grand Canyon, and from the Grand Canyon, of course, they ended up now in the newest book that I'm working on. I was very influenced by the Eastern Sierras. I think it's absolutely beautiful. If you've ever been up to Bishop and in Lone Pine.
Yeah.
Okay, now Lone Pine has a great Hollywood history. All the Westerns or anything you ever saw, they're in the 30s and 40s, even up to today. I mean, they were and not only Westerns, but science fiction. We're all in Gunga Din was one. Right. Yeah, the Alabama Hills.
Yep.
So we've made several trips up there. So I got the new book deals with that. And so it talks about the old Westerns. It gives them a little bit more of an old Western feel to it. you know, you had the old Gabby Hayes and Roy Rogers and Hopalong Cassidy and all of those within this new novel. And I'm having a blast with it. I know that because you're basically reliving all those great things that you remember
That's
when you were a kid.
I want to say something about setting, because I agree with Tony. Setting is a wonderful character. Just real quick about the dog. I wrote this book, and then my editor, who is unmerciful. You need an editor who just tears you apart, and this one does. She said, give the dog an arc or dump the dog. And of course, I used the dog like a fool in all 3 novels. I should have killed him off. And so this dog had to start like nowhere and become a special dog. I still have not got a dog today because I think that queered me on the whole deal. But setting is so important. And I'm just like Tony. Everywhere I go, I pick up the setting as a character, and I just got to go with it.
Yeah.
In my boat with my husband, we had a trawler, and we went up to Alaska and back from Washington State, from the Fidalgo area, and then up to Alaska and back several times. And we pulled into this place called Petersburg. Now, my husband and I are Scandinavian, and I had no idea when I got off that boat that I had just landed in Norway. Petersburg was settled by Norwegian fishermen in the early 1900s. And it's full of Viking stuff and lefse and uftas and anything you want that's Norwegian. I had to write a book about that place. And it was so much fun. I had a book opening there, and the whole town seemed to show up. I got on the radio. You can make this a real adventure to talk about a setting and make sure it has a good place in your novel.
Right. And you know, getting back to the dog as well too, one of the things I use it for comedy relief. And of course, having owned a dog, there's a lot of funny things that did happen with us. And so those ended up in the book.
Perfect.
So these are real things.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine you're sleeping in bed and suddenly this dog just jumps from nowhere right between you. I mean, that's the scariest thing in the world when you're half asleep. I mean, and it adds to the suspense to the story too, because if you're in a hotel where there's like in the Del Coronado, where there's all this talk about ghosts and all this other stuff,
Sure.
and then you hear crying in the night that's going on in the background, and you're laying in bed and suddenly you're thinking about this and this dog jumps right between you.
Oh!
Yeah, exactly. That's the other thing. The other thing I want to mention about talking about location, actually my last book is one of the most successful books that I've had. And the reason why is this one was set on the Central Coast. So we have Santa Maria. I bring in Hearst's Castle, and I bring in William Randolph Hearst and his mistress. I disguised the name some, but we had murder basically happening at the castle.
Cool.
And because of that, I found that people that, especially in this area, in the local bookstores and stuff, they're eating it up because they like that particular something that is related to tourists, especially something related to something that's in that area. Now, I think Victoria Heckman, one of her things is Hawaii. So she gets bookstores in Hawaii in order to sell there.
She has a background herself. in
Right,
Hawaii.
exactly.
Right.
Yeah. So, and I think Sue, she does also around in this area as well too. So that's something to think about when you're writing.
That's like, if you go side a minute to Mara Pearl in her novels, and she's created this town, which she renamed, but actually, we all know it's Morro Bay.
Right.
No, it's Cambria.
It's Cambria, rather.
Right.
And she actually went to England, and there's a town in Wales that's named exactly the same.
Right.
And she based a radio show on it and then wrote books on it.
Yeah.
But she ties all those things in,
Right.
Yep.
much like you're talking about,
Yeah.
you know, but the scenic part is very good, whether it's a tenement in New York or whether you're at the Hotel Del Coronado, but it cannot take over. And too many writers will get carried away with
Description.
the scenery and the taste and the smells and everything. And after a while, you're lost, like, who the hell is the character?
Or something
You know?
in the Michener territory.
Oh, yeah, Susan Tuttle's famous injunction was, don't be a missioner. The first 100 pages can't describe where you are.
Right.
Well, and then if you're even more basic, you know, if you describe a gun, this is the old saw, if you describe a gun that's sitting up at the side of a wall in a room, the gun needs to be important, and you better bring it back in. And I guess we haven't talked about red herrings, and I think we can't leave this conversation without at least talking about that. But again, I was thinking about this before our talk, and I think you all use red herrings in your works. It's just that ours are perhaps more scientifically developed and more carefully coalesced into the work. What I mean by that,
What do you mean by red herring? Can you?
a red herring is a distraction, is a misdirection. So there's a character in your novel, I'm thinking about any of you, or in your poem, who seems to be one way, and you're thinking, uh-oh, this is the guy.
Mhm.
And then later on, it turns out not to be the guy. And that kind of thing is done in poetry, it's done in short stories, and all. Red herrings are everywhere. What it does for the reader, and this is why our works are, I think, vital, and it offers the puzzle, the intrigue, the interest. I mean, remember that order thing? It's people want to figure it all out. It's a puzzle. They want to figure it all out, and they're thinking, I wonder if I should pay attention to that. Well, if you're a good writer, the reader should be paying attention to everything, because everything counts.
Yeah.
But that is the hardest thing to write and to do in the world. And you've got to keep track of all your red herrings, so you address them by the end.
And you have to keep changing your puzzle too.
Yes.
Because if you have a certain pattern, like sometimes Agatha Christie, you always knew it was the doctor and his girlfriend or something. You might figure it to be that. Or in some
The butler
movies,
did it.
the butler,
Yeah.
very rarely the butler did.
I know.
something. But I would find also that sometimes the character that's the least person that you think would be the suspicious one is the guy who ended up being the killer. So then you start watching for that, like in some of the old movies.
Yes.
But if you can get by that and not pull those kind of things and keep varying things from time
Yes.
to time, then I think your readers appreciate that.
But look what she did with the Orient Express.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, that was good. Actually, the one I've been thinking of is The Murder of Roger Ackroyd, which I think was a real classic. You know, the misdirection in that. I don't want to give it away, but you, again,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and that's why I think we should all try that. Maybe we should just have a group write on an unreliable narrator. And I was thinking of that movie. Oh, brother, the good something. Anyway, unreliable narrators can easily throw red herrings. The whole character is unreliable, and so that's a big red herring, and that could really be a challenge for a reader.
Well, actually, Rolynn, that's the problem with Agatha Christie in that particular book, because they cried foul. Some of them, some thought it was brilliant, and some said they cried foul
It's
because
true.
of it. Yeah, yeah.
Exactly.
I'd like to tell you, we don't want to ruin it for Miss Christie's.
Are we ready for questions? Are we good? What else do you want to talk about, kids?
Well, did we want to take questions now? Or you want to go a little bit
What's
further?
our schedule?
Our schedule? I don't know what the schedule is.
Tell us, Mary.
What's our schedule? I should know that.
We're out of here by midnight, right?
Judy, tell
It's
me
the teacher in me.
when they're done talking.
When you're done talking. Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's a good time for questions.
One up front.
I have a question, and that is, when you begin to write a book, do you already know how it's going to end?
Could you repeat the question for the Zoom people?
He's asking, when we all set out to write a book, do we already know how it's going to end? And I would say absolutely not. And I am very unusual. I remember I told you I'm the one who resists outlining. I don't want to know because I want to be as surprised as you are. Now, you can carry that only so far. And I love revision. So I write the book chapter by chapter, scene by scene, and I go back and revise the next day. Then I keep going, then I keep going, then I keep going. Then I have the book done, and then it's time to really have at it. This is way before my editor. And so that ending that I thought that came about may switch it up. But I really like to have that at the computer every day, being surprised about what happens on my computer and in my head. It's a fulfilling, exciting time for me, and I don't want to destroy that feeling.
But that's because you're a pantser.
I am a
That's
pantser.
right.
Does everybody know what a pantser is?
No.
Okay, a pantser is somebody who sits down and starts writing, and whatever comes out, you go by the seat of your pants, and oh, that's a great thing too, and then you get to the end and you got 5 different novels, and you have to start editing. But the thing is, like Roland's saying, is for her to be an organizer would be deadly, because she doesn't want to know what the end is, you know. But you have to have some sense of organization, and some people like and
Which one?
English, like
And
Perry.
Perry.
Ann Perry.
Perry.
From what I understand about Anne, she writes a synopsis of every chapter. That's like 30 pages long before she's working on the book.
Each chapter.
Actually,
Each chapter.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Bill, but that's when you're dealing with the big publishers. Those are the things you have to do. And I wouldn't like
It
that.
depends on where you are in that, how popular you are.
Uh-huh.
At first, you've got to do that, but later, when what Dennis is saying is that I've got to have it the way I do. And as I said, I'm in trouble with this newest novel because it's harder to approach that way. But you have to have an innate sense of organization. Otherwise, it won't work.
Right.
And every day I rethink and rethink and rethink. It's not like I'm not organizing as I go.
Right.
But I did, I'll tell you a failure I had of a book that I sent to my editor, and she said, there are 2 books here and they don't go together. And I said, damn it. She said, it's not going to work. And I said, yes, it is. I made it work. All my life as a student, I have loved finding connections, like Judy said, to things that are not connected. It's something weird about me. I love doing that. You say, there's this over here and that over there, and I'll go, I can see how they are alike, or how they, it's something I just love to do.
Isn't your first draft the equivalent of an outline?
Maybe.
Because in their first draft, you figure out the end, and the whole plot is there for you.
Yes, but I may go back and change it
All right.
completely. Yeah,
But you can do that with an outline too.
sure, but I just don't want it destroyed, my imagination.
Well, I think too, it's sort of the freedom of when you're writing, because I find sometimes I'll start to develop this storyline and I'm moving along and I have one thing in mind, but then suddenly something sounds a lot better. So if they had the outline, you feel like you're sort of hemmed in
Yeah,
or whatever
right.
metric.
Yeah.
Where in this case, I said, oh, great, now this is go off in this direction. And so it really adds all the little twists and turns that a mystery should have, and
Yeah.
it works well.
Yeah,
that
yeah,
way.
and it's like this too. I'll write, but then, you know how you're supposed to start in the middle of things when everything's exciting? I'll throw away the first, 3 chapters because the stuff really got exciting right here. So but those 3 are backstory, which you need to have written and thought about so that you do a better job with the real story as it comes about. It's very unusual process, isn't it?
Oh, I'm a devoted outliner. I'll take a book that's going to end up at 300, 350 pages, and my outline will be 20 or 30 pages at least.
Sure.
But as I'm writing my book and I see a better way to do it, I don't mind varying from the
Perfect.
outline. I'm happy to do that. I
Good.
find it improvement. But the outline does a very interesting thing for me, and I don't know whether other people feel the same way, but by having that outline, I have separated the story from the language.
Yeah.
So the story, I'm figuring out the story. I don't care what the language is, the outline, I don't care how well it's written or not,
Sure.
just so it has all the stuff in it. When I have the outline all done, then I forget the story because I got it down. Then I can concentrate on the language. That's the way, and having the outline gives me confidence that I can do the whole book.
Sure, sure. I think we all find our own methodologies, and as I've said, I don't think every book, I try something new with every book, so each one I feel like is, that's the trouble with writing. I always feel like an amateur, because you're challenging yourself in this new poem, this new short story, this new novel, and you say, God, I've never been here before. So, but isn't that the thrill of it? Why would we want
Nice to
to
be
do
surprised,
category stuff?
Yeah,
Mhm.
it's good to have a surprise here and there.
Mary,
I have another question, and you have to repeat it. And so do all of you interface with police, law enforcement and stuff on your books from time to time in your research? Any people?
Sure.
that you
Mary is
contact?
asking whether we interact with the professionals like law enforcement folk. Speaking for myself, I'm thinking about Fire is Nice, which is about a FBI trained ranger in Sequoia National Park. And I don't know if you know this, but FBI and the arms carrying rangers in our parks are trained the same way. So I found a ranger to talk to who was also FBI trained. And I found a, oh gosh, he was field and something, wildlife. And he knew all about guns and he knew all about equipment and everything. Man, if you can find those people and they'll talk to you, absolutely.
Yep,
Yeah, actually, I have my sources as well too, but I was also fortunate. My father was a police officer in the San Francisco area, and I grew up with a lot of police officers, and homicide detectives, and I was been at the Hall of Justice, and I was in, unfortunately, the morgue. But working with the film companies, we did the same thing, because all the ones that I worked on, like The Streets of San Francisco or Dirty Harry or Magnum Force, all of those, we all worked with this police, the police scenario. So I basically read the scripts and went through all of that. So I have all that background behind me as well. And then when I do get into areas that I don't know, I was fortunate in the case of The Curse of the Crimson Dragon, where I'm writing about a U-boat, a submarine. Well, one of the fellows I knew was on a submarine. He understood submarine. So I got information from him. If I needed things on weapons, he knew a lot about weapons, or he could direct me in the right direction. So yeah, I think it's extremely important because you don't want to get those details wrong if you can help it. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I did, in my case, have some connections as well too.
Do your characters ever take over the story?
That's a good one.
Versus what?
Like when you have a plot and you
Oh,
feel this character's not
absolutely.
gonna, oh, what about, you have to rewrite it or?
Well, do you mean that they kind of take over
Yeah,
in a bad way or a good way?
either way.
Do they tell you what's gonna happen next?
You do start thinking the way they think
Mhm.
and do what they might do. And it behooves you to say to yourself, oh, they wouldn't say that, or they wouldn't do that. And I have had people tell me when I talk about my characters that they seem like they're real and
Uh-huh.
they're actually people that I know. And I always think, well, that's a good sign. What our danger is, and actually you said a little bit about this already. The dangerous thing is we all have a voice, themes that we're trying to get across, a vision for each novel that we're carrying to the reader. But our voice, we try to change the characters and their syntax, their likes and dislikes and personalities and stuff. But the hard part is to change the author's voice And I have a feeling that in all of our books, in all of Tony's books and all of mine, you're going to hear my voice, especially in the narrative level. And since I'm speaking in the limited omniscient, you're probably going to hear it more in mine than you are in Tony's, because Tony's speaking from one character's point of view. And so you got to look at viewpoint before you start thinking. I mean, you got to think about that. Look at, and if it's an unreliable narrator, then what?
But a lot of it is like you step into your character's shoes and you create a scenario, and then you sort of look at it and say, okay, well, what would I do in that position? You know, or what would I say? The limitations could be in the fact that, well, if in this case you're in the 1930s, certain phrases or certain things is something that wouldn't be said, you know, based upon what we say today. So you have to think about that. And that's where the research comes in again. That's when I start watching the movies, listening to the dialogue and all of that, because you want to understand what, you know,
Right.
what they're talking about, what's going on, and so on and so forth.
Do you ever have experiences with your characters? Like, for instance, my characters seem to enjoy waiting until I'm in the shower to attack me. And come up with some great stuff, you know. The problem is you can only write so many things when you're in the shower, you know, but the characters have to have a life of their own to some degree.
Right, right.
And when my friend and I were working on the shoot 'em up movies, we would spend maybe a week closeted in this apartment up in Washington Heights in New York. And we would stay in character as much as possible for that week, which can get really strange. You can- no, seriously, you can ask my wife. I was in character when we were in, I think we were down in Santa Maria at this fundraiser, and everybody was dressed like 30s and 40s, and I had my Corbin hat on, and I'm leaning up against the pool table and fingering a bunch of chips. And my wife doesn't know that I'm suddenly in character. And she comes up and says, you know, that I could probably get the band to play a tango and we could dance. And in character, I go, Corbin doesn't dance. Boy, was that a bad night for me and Corbin.
Yes. Well, you know, David Suchet, when he played Perot, he would not get out of character. Once the mustache and the thing came on, they would talk to him all day long and he would stay in character.
A lot of actors will do that.
And it was very important. And then, of course, you look at somebody like Peter Sellers, who had so many different characters, and I think psychologically, it's really screwed him up.
Yeah.
You know, that could be a danger too.
I think the tricky part is writing a character who's nothing like you are. And of course, you have to avoid the stereotyping. But I challenged myself with this ranger. She, in the line of duty, was poisoned with carbon monoxide, which fried her amygdala. She has no fear. Where I got this idea, hell if I know. It's the dog again, right? And so I'm writing about a woman who's not afraid of a damn thing. Try writing about that. That is a huge challenge. And I've got a series with her. I've got the Sequoia National Park. And then I'm going to go to St. John. Somebody's got the Virgin Island. And because, by the way, that's 75% national park. And she's going to go there too, my ranger. And I like hanging with a woman who's got not one shred of fear. Now, she was fearful before she had this disease, this amygdala fry. But so she has taught herself, she's got a big list of things that she needs to be afraid of. It's hilarious. So she could still be an FBI agent. She's done she took a year off to try to figure out how to do this, but she still makes mistakes. But she's a good ranger. You want her on your side because she's not afraid.
We can't wait to hear those books. That's great. Does anybody have any more questions?
Does anybody, you get out the Zoom to see if anybody has questions?
Oh, online, that's right.
Oh.
Yeah, we should ask. Well, you guys ask them.
There you are.
Hi, anybody online have some questions?
Let's see how you can see.
Can we hear them? Steve, we can't see them. Raise their hands.
Or in chat? Are there any questions?
Can you hear us?
You want anything in chat or?
That's one of the frustrating parts about being Zoom.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's tough. It's hard to be involved.
So Jody looks like she has a question.
Yeah, does anybody have questions online?
Gotta unmute yourself.
Unmute if you have a question. Nope. Oh, we have another question.
Just curious, it sounds like Rolynn writes chronologically from start to finish, then edits, of course, but is that how you all write, or do you do scenes, you go forward and back, or does it change with each book?
You want to start that off, Ro?
have to repeat the question.
I am mostly writing chronologically. The book about Petersburg interplays the 1920s and present day. I've learned, I know Tony can't do this, but I've learned that I need, for the most part, to not mention what year it is. Try not to use tech that's too specific, so that my books will last for all time. And that's tricky too. But chronologically is the way I write, but I love synchronicity. I love Joseph Heller's Catch-22. I love books that jump in time, and I'm still going to write one of those. I love synchronicity.
Yeah, no, mostly chronologically. I do. I think it was only one case where I just wanted to try something that was further on in the story, which was basically a fight scene or a chase. And I just felt like, no, I want to write this now. So I wrote it, and then when the time came, I put it in. But most of the time, it's usually chronologically as well, too.
You see, with me, it's exactly diametrically opposed to that. I have, like I say, my characters will attack me in the shower, or when I'm doing something else totally. And I need to write that down, at least write a quick note about what it is that comes down. But it,
Oh, they're not attacking you. That's when you get ideas?
yeah,
Oh, I thought they were actually, on top. And you were, what?
sometimes that in the shower, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Well, let's give these guys a big hand for everything they've done. Are your books for sale tonight?
Yes,
course.
I have, I'm coming up with some new book covers. So I would love to give some books away tonight.
Oh,
However, if you do, okay, think of it this way. If you like my genre and would like to read one of my books, I'd love to give one to you. And I hope that if you enjoy it, you'll write a review. And then that would be the quid pro quo there. And you could just pick whatever it is that you would like, one per family, and
That's awesome.
Yep.
Don't expect you to do that.
thank you. All right. Thank you very much, you guys. Yeah.
Well, thank you, guys.
you're welcome. I thought it was fun. Very fun.
You don't do them all on golf, right? I read the golf.
What's that?
I read the golf one.
You've read Bad Light.